Jr.
James Bond is one of the most recognised characters in modern fiction. But in the early 1990s, the Bond franchise tried something radically different. Instead of another movie, they launched a children's TV cartoon, and with it, a full line of action figures, vehicles and playsets. Today, we're taking a brief nostalgic look back at the James Bond Jr. action figure range, how it connected to the animated series, how the franchise expanded into one of the more ambitious kids merchandising attempts of the early 1990s, and why the whole brand ultimately disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. This is our retrospective of James Bond Jr., the cartoon, the merchandise, and the action figures that tried to turn James Bond into a Saturday morning toy brand.
James Bond Jr. chases scum around the world.
So to understand the action figures, we need to understand the James Bond Jr. brand itself. By 1991, the James Bond film franchise was in an unusual position. The series was between films and between Bonds. The legal disputes surrounding Bond 17 meant no new movie had been released since License to Kill in 1989. With Bond momentarily out of cinemas, the rights holders looked for ways to keep the brand visible. The strategy? Expand into children's entertainment, a market Bond had never touched before. This is where James Bond Jr. came in. The animated series, produced by Murakami Wolf Svensson and licensed by Danjaq, followed the adventures of the nephew of the famous 007. The logic behind that relation has always been vague, but the key idea was simple. Make a teen hero who could exist in a G-rated universe while still borrowing names, villains and gadgets from the Bond franchise. The show aired in syndication starting in September 1991 and ran for 65 episodes. Its tone was light, gadget-heavy, and full of villainous plots created by Scum, the cartoon's stand-in for Spectre. And since this was the early 90s, a cartoon meant one thing: toys. The action figure line was produced by Hasbro under their short-lived Kenner-inspired Hasbro Toy Group branding. Released in 1991, the line was designed to support the cartoon, but also stand on its own as a recognisable Bond-themed toy franchise. The pitch was straightforward. You've got a teen super spy protagonist, a roster of villains with exaggerated designs perfect for action figures, a focus on gadgets, accessories and vehicles, and enough world building from the cartoon to justify an entire toy ecosystem. And we've got a selection of toys from this range here, just a small selection to look at today whilst we talk about this cartoon and toy line as a whole. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you ever watched this cartoon as a kid or if you ever owned any of these toys when you were young. I've always been a big fan of James Bond, so James Bond Jr. really appealed to me, and I loved that cartoon when it was out. Not that it ever reached the heights of the Ninja Turtles or the real Ghostbusters for me. And just before we continue, thanks to everybody that's been subscribing recently. If you're enjoying this video, why not hit that subscribe button? Our community would love to have you here. And if this specific topic interests you, I also co-host a James Bond podcast called The Ultimate Bondcast. I'll link to the channel in the description, but why not go check us out? So the toy line featured multiple versions of James Bond Jr., usually with different suit colours or themed accessories. Typical sets included the Street Clothes edition, wearing his brown jacket, blue jeans and red shirt, or a variant emphasising the gadgets, designed to compete with figures like Skyglider Leonardo or Jetpack Duke. So let's take a look at this James Bond Jr. figure in hand. And while you might think he's quite a bland figure, I think he pretty closely represents what you saw on screen in the cartoon. He's got his brown school jacket on, along with a red shirt and blue jeans, which kind of becomes that his iconic look from the show, or at least his standard look when he's not fighting crime. He's got some really interesting white sneakers on with some yellow laces, so he's really bright and colourful even though he's got a big brown jacket on, and you can see the Hasbro branding on the back of that there. But I don't think he's a bad looking figure. I think his face is pretty bland. It's just a standard bloke, you know, he's just a guy. But he comes with a really interesting play feature. and it is called his shoot from the hip feature. So what you do is you can pull the gun down and you can turn him sideways, and it shoots around and he pulls the gun out on somebody. And I guess it's kind of mirroring that gun barrel sequence look from the Bond movies. So maybe an iconic gun movement that we can associate with James Bond. But I think it's a really fun play feature, and it's held up really well. You know, it's survived a lot of play, so that's a testament to how it's built, really. I think that the face sculpt here looks pretty nice. I think it's, again, pretty bland, but I don't think they've done a bad job. The mold is great, and actually, you know, you can see Hasbro trying to compete with Kenner and Playmates here with sort of the quality of their figures, and I think they pretty much achieve it. We said it was standard 5 points of articulation on this figure, so you can see the head moves okay, as does the left arm, but the right arm is part of that play feature, and the legs kick forwards and backwards a pretty decent amount. So it's not a bad 5 points of articulation, and despite his arm being out all the time, it stands up pretty well as well, so he doesn't fall forwards with that arm out. So I really like the guy. I think it's a pretty good figure. And other hero characters included IQ, the gadget inventor, loosely inspired by Q from the films, and Gordo Leiter, the athletic son of Felix Leiter, reinforcing the series' attempt to tie into Bond lore without fully using movie continuity. And these figures were intentionally bright, approachable, and heavily accessory driven. Let's take a look at IQ now, one of James Bond Jr.'s allies. And this is a really bright and fun figure, isn't it? I mean, he's seen a lot of play and it's missing a lot of parts. You can see he hasn't even got the paint on his nose anymore, but he's missing the paper or fabric jacket, the long lab coat that he wore, and also the play feature, which we'll talk about in a moment. But look how bright and colourful this guy is. Those fantastic pink pants with those sort of mauve crimson shoes on, and he's got a turquoise shirt and an orange tie. But that's why his arms are white, is because the rest of the lab coat is missing. That's why it doesn't match his shirt. I love that bright yellow blonde hair on here as well. And again, just a nicely made figure. But the reason that he would have had that paper jacket is because of his play feature, which was sort of a hidden punch out feature, where you see the black piece of plastic that now doesn't even really work anymore. What you would have done is there would have been a pole with like a red boxing glove attached to it, and when you pulled on that lever on his back, that would have shot up and out of his jacket. One of the more flimsy accessories on a figure. It just didn't survive play, you know. That's one of the things that happens. And again, you put a piece of paper on a plastic toy. For kids, it's not going to last long. But I respect the attempt. It was thinking outside of the box and it was trying something different. And the figure itself, whilst it's still got a number of parts missing, it still looks good, you know, and it still sits, I think, well against some of the other figures in the range. We can look at articulation on this figure as well, and it hasn't even got 5 points of articulation, actually. The head doesn't move at all, and that might be because of all the mechanics inside the figure that support that play feature. Both of his arms move freely, as do both of his legs, kicking out forwards and backwards slightly. So, yeah, I mean, it's 4 points of articulation, I guess, plus one play feature. But regardless, I think he's such a great, fun, bright, happy figure that makes me smile when I see him. And then there's the villains, where the line really stood out. Hasbro clearly enjoyed designing exaggerated interpretations of classic Bond villains. They included Dr. No, who was reimagined with green skin and a samurai-inspired aesthetic, one of the most distinctive figures of the series. There was Jaws, my favourite villain in the show, the iconic metal-toothed henchman, more cartoonish now, but still one of the most popular toys. An Oddjob, redesigned with a bulkier physique and that classic weaponised bowler hat. Other villains included characters created specifically for the cartoon, all with toy-friendly gimmicks and oversized weapons. Each villain came with accessories too, usually too large to be practical, but perfect for early 90s toy exaggeration. Now with villains, let's take a look at my favourite figure from the range, and that is the Jaws figure. And I think this guy looks so much fun. I love the blue suit on him that gives him that kind of 30s gangster look, as does the slick back hair, and we'll get down to his shoes as well, but those kind of comedically big clown shoes, also designed to give that kind of 30s gangster look. You've got like a really hairy sort of, you can see skin around his hands and his feet. They give kind of a wrinkly, hairy look to this guy, which also gives the indication that the suit he's wearing isn't even big enough for him, which just makes his figure look even funnier. I love the animated nature of this suit as well. It's got so much movement to it, so many creases. I even love the pocket square kind of pulling out of his pocket there. And the jaws, wow. I mean, the jaws look fantastic, being bright silver, like he's part machine, like it's all built in. And this ratchet feature, just listen to how cool this feature sounds. Yeah, it's awesome. The fact that they gave it that, they could easily have made it where his arm moves up and the mouth moves up and down. They didn't have to leave in that ratchet feature, but leaving that noise in, I feel like it adds something from a play perspective for a kid. And the sound just makes him sound more mechanical than he even looks. So it just adds to his whole aura. Now, this figure would also have come with a pipe, and that pipe you could have put in his mouth and he could have looked to have eaten it. But yeah, other than that, he didn't really come with any other accessories. But such a big figure, I think he's great and just so much fun to play with, and still looks fantastic on the shelf with all the other figures. This guy's held up well, and another one where the play feature is quite hard wearing. Let's take a look at articulation on this guy as well. And again, no head movement on this one for obvious reasons. His left arm will move freely because his right arm is built into the play feature, and both of his legs move freely. So actually this guy, 3 points of articulation with 1 play feature. So yeah, from an articulation perspective, not a lot there, but very, very much a fun figure. And the toy line included several vehicles. You had the Bondmobile, which was a bright, futuristic sports car with spring-loaded weapons. You had the Attack Cycle, a motorcycle designed for the Bond Jr. figure scale. So the action figure line mirrored the tone of the TV series. And the show leaned heavily into high-tech gadgets, villain of the week storylines, and a world where teenage spies could thwart global crime syndicates without violence beyond cartoon antics. And that meant the toys didn't include guns designed to look realistic. Instead, they featured neon grappling hooks, laser devices, and missile launchers. Any guns were bright and unusual colours. The character sculpts matched the exaggerated style of the show, complete with large hands and expressive faces typical of early 90s animation-based toy lines. Several episodes were clearly designed with merchandising in mind, particularly ones that showcased unique gadgets or vehicles that later appeared in toy form. And parallel to the toys, the James Bond Jr. brand expanded rapidly. There was a Marvel comic series that ran for 12 issues, there were young adult novels, many of them gadget-focused, and there was a Super Nintendo and an NES video game tying into the same visual identity. Hasbro expected the toy line to anchor the brand across TV, comics and books, mirroring the transmedia approach of G.I. Joe or Transformers. But despite the push, sales were modest. The cartoon did not become a breakout hit, and without a strong TV anchor, toy momentum faltered. Production ceased after the initial waves, though unsold stock continued to circulate into the mid-1990s. Several factors contributed to the short life of this action figure range. I mean, number one, the core Bond audience wasn't children. Even with the cartoon tailoring, Bond's identity was built on adult themes. The cartoon never became a ratings powerhouse, and the early 90s toy market was saturated. You had many competing lines like Ninja Turtles, Batman, Power Rangers, Ghostbusters dominating shelf space. And there was lack of new media support. No Bond movies were released during the run of the cartoon, and that all made the brand synergy difficult. By the time GoldenEye revived the Bond franchise in 1995, James Bond Jr. had already faded from public memory. So while not a commercial success, the James Bond Jr. action figures have developed a small but passionate collector base. Collectors appreciate the line for its distinct early 90s aesthetic, its uncommon Bond-related merchandise, and its short production run, which makes complete sets challenging to find. Carded figures of Dr. No, Jaws and Oddjob are particularly sought after. Prototypes occasionally surface as well, providing rare glimpses at unreleased concepts. And while the cartoon is often joked about among Bond fans, the toys remain a unique piece of Bond history. A time when the franchise experimented, pushed into kids' marketing, and created one of its most unusual spin-offs. The James Bond Jr. action figure line is a fascinating artifact. It represents a moment when James Bond stepped outside the adult spy genre and into the world of Saturday morning cartoons and toy aisles. It may not have reshaped the franchise, but it left behind a distinctive toyetic legacy. Brightly coloured heroes, exaggerated villains, and a brand that dared to reinvent 007 for a new audience, even if only briefly. If you grew up with these toys, or even if you discovered them years later, they remain a memorable, if unusual, chapter in Bond history. Thanks so much for joining us today for this RetroTOYspective of the James Bond Jr. toy line, along with a look at the cartoon and the legacy of that short-lived James Bond child-friendly property. If you enjoyed it, please pop a like on the video, it's incredibly helpful to me. And also consider subscribing to the channel for future RetroTOYspectives, along with future action figure news and reviews. And as I said before, if James Bond is your thing, why not check out the podcast that I co-host along with my friend Mike called The Ultimate Bondcast, where we do monthly podcasts chatting about the Bond franchise. We look at what's happening in the world of news, and we're doing movie reviews and also game playthroughs at the moment. But even if none of that interests you, why not check out the last RetroTOYspective I did on the real Ghostbusters Firehouse right now? Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you all take care. Bye now.